Hi, my name is Colleen Ellis, and I'm a student here at Cape Cod Community College. I love this school, and I'm currently the president of Student Government and the Debate Club. Coming to Cape Cod Community College, I wanted to make sure that I got the most out of my experience here. I came from a large school in Rhode Island. After my freshman year, I was saddened to realize that it just wasn't the place for me. I transferred to Cape Cod Community College for what was supposed to be a brief reevaluation of my ambitions and goals for college. I came here thinking that this was just going to be a pit stop for me. That is, until I fell in love with the school. The professors and faculty care so much, and they really want the best for you. Everything felt personalized. I knew that being a student here meant more than showing up to class, doing homework, and submitting papers. One of the best things I did for myself was join clubs and organizations here. Joining the Debate Club and the Student Government Association has truly made me a fully rounded individual and helped me prepare for my next destination after 4Cs, wherever that may be. Not only did I gain important life skills like leadership, public speaking, and time management, but I made a lot of lifelong friends along the way and meaningful connections. It's really easy to get the most out of Cape Cod Community College. Try as much as you can while you're here. Who knows? Maybe you have a secret talent in debating or have always wanted to be the face of leadership on campus. And you may never know unless you give it a shot. Show up to as many different club meetings as you can. Try everything and try anything. As we always say, powerful futures start here. But the choice to start your powerful future is in your hands. I look forward to seeing you all at some of the meetings this fall and maybe even the spring too. Welcome to Cape Cod Community College.
Hello, my name is Savannah O'Brien and I'm the incoming Vice President of SGA as well as the President of Orchard Club and the Certified Peer Educator here on campus. I started at Cape Cod Community College as a dual enrollment student while I was still in high school, and I'm finishing up my degree here before I eventually move on. The thing I love most about 4Cs is that whether you're from the Cape or just passing through, 4Cs quickly becomes a second home. No matter where you're at in life, Cape Cod Community College will help you provide the support necessary to get you where you want to be and might even help uncover some new interests and passions along the way. When I first started here, I was shy and hesitant to participate in any activities, and now I'm involved with multiple clubs and helping to plan events, including planting an orchard right here on campus. All of our clubs are open to members and typically have very little requirements. Just show up. My experience here at 4Cs has been dramatically improved by participating in the activities and events that are available, and it all started just by going to one club meet and greet. 4Cs has helped me discover my passion for environmental science and horticulture, and Orchard Club has allowed me to put both into practice, taking soil samples and helping to maintain our orchard. This club was founded on the principles of sustainability, community, and legacy, and as the new president of this club and vice president of SGA, I hope to bring these principles to the whole school. I want to inspire and encourage others who might not feel like they fit in to make that leap and get involved with something new. You might be surprised at where you end up.
One of the things that I love about this school in particular is that you really put yourself directly in the setting. So our hangar doors open out to the airport's apron. That's where the airplanes are, that's where the action happens. And so it's not removed from, it's not distant from the work that you're going to do, it's right in the midst of. And so there's a lot of opportunity, learning, connections, networking that happens all the time. The faculty in a program like this one, and particularly ours, brings forward some really useful real-world experience. So the people that have been out there, done the job, put their hands on the equipment, know what it's like, know what the work culture is like, and then are able to bring that back and articulate it in the classroom.
It's important to have a school where the faculty has broad experience because one thing, not only do they teach you how to work on airplanes, but they have the information and the experience, so this way they can help you decide which direction you may want to take your career. All the faculty here does the same thing. They speak to the students, look at the students' strong points, and make suggestions on which direction they might want to consider going.
We really care about aviation. We love aviation, and we tried to bring our love of it and transfer it over to the students.
Our staff has a very wide variety of experience. So we got guys that work on just small airplanes, we got guys that work on just big airplanes, and we got a lot of people that work on both.
When you first show up, there's a heavy emphasis on just some real important fundamentals. Some of that is how to get in the mindset of being a technician in a super safety sensitive field, and then moves into the fundamentals, the math, the science you're going to need, and then from there into the really fun, the tangible, how do you disassemble that engine and rebuild it? How do you fabricate that sheet metal part? How do you paint, how do you weld, all the things that are necessary in the field get covered here so that when you leave, you're ready to go. Aviation maintenance technology is a growing field. They're going to need technicians going into the future.
The opportunities are immense. That's what we try to impart on the students. Once you get your airframe and power plant license, you can take your career any direction you want.
You should come to Cape Cod Community College for aviation maintenance because the faculty is ready and prepared to do everything to make you successful.
Welcome, Dr. Cox, you're on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Cape Cod Community College today for our first intentional critical conversation of the academic year. I'm really pleased and delighted to introduce renowned Haitian American poet Danielle Legros. Danielle is the winner of the New England Poetry Club Sheila Margaret Motten Book Prize, and among her other accomplishments is the Poet Laureate of the City of Boston. On a personal note, when I read her work in the poem, The Poorest Country in the Western Hemisphere, I'm reminded of the hope and opportunity she paints with her descriptive language about Haiti, as I think about our college's connection to Haiti through our former student trustee and our students who worked on constructing a well in the country. Danielle truly connects us to our global community, and today she joins host Sarah Ann Samito to discuss her art, her background, and what drives her storytelling. Welcome, Danielle.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Cox. So before we begin the reading and conversation with Danielle Legros, I'd like to welcome you all here to Cape Cod Community College. I'm your host and academic coordinator, Sarah Ann Samito. So thank you for joining us, not only for Intentional Critical Conversations, but Intentional Critical Conversations, the interview that helped us kick off the first season and the second season that began with Hispanic Heritage Month. So I'd like to take a moment to first acknowledge where we are actually at. Right now, we are in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, named after the Massachusetts nation. So we need to acknowledge the original peoples here. And I'd like to give a huge shout out and recognition to the Massachusetts and Ponkapog Tribal Council. Very important, I'd like to recognize the land in which this great college was built on that belongs to the Mashpee Nation and the Mashpee Tribal Council right up the street. We'd like to recognize them. Also today, we have joining us, named after the great sachem, Chief Massasoit. We have Massachusetts Community College, sister college to Cape Cod Community College in the house, Massasoit Community College. So thank you. And it's really important to give thank yous. I'd like to recognize our campus police department, and the wonderful criminal justice interns. I'd like to also recognize the Tilden Arts Center who make all these events possible. So it's important to do that. The IDEA Committee, which stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, and of course the Advising Center here at the college. So I'd like to give us a teeny bit of background as to where we left off last season. Remember, we learned about the red, the black, the green, the transatlantic slave trade. We learned about the Arawak and the Taino. And remember, when we think of the Arawak, we think of the huge umbrella. And right underneath that rests the Taino people. And Haiti, which we think of H, and I have to look at my paper because there's a different spelling of this word, but H, A-I-T-I-A. Remember, it was first called Saint-Domingue, right? It was a French colony. And you learned the name of Toussaint Louverture. However, you didn't learn the name of his two generals, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe. And they fought for the independence of this first free Black nation in this hemisphere. Now, I'm not sure if they called on the spirits of Duchi Boukman or Makandal. And Makandal was someone we would call a spiritual advisor, or Hugan, who was put to death at the stake by the French because it was a French colony. So when we see the name Haiti, it went from Saint-Domingue to the Taino spelling of Haiti, then to Haiti. So I want us to take away a little bit of history of Haiti. And I'd also like for us to recognize what artists do. They speak truth to power, they create. And sometimes what they create, it's prolific, it's provocative. And when we speak of these conversations that have the isms, remember we learned last year, sexism, racism, criticism, and we learned about intersectionality and the struggle of that the BIPOC student has, and even the first generation white American student has. We've learned that we've come a long way, but there's still further to come and to travel. And it's so important that when we have artists such as Miss Danielle Legros, and we've had the Wizard of Wheelock, Susan Kossoff, on, that we really try to support them when they are speaking truth. So enough from me. I'd like for us to give a huge bonjour, Shari, and a sek pakseh, and a huge Cape Cod Community College welcome to poet Danielle Legros George. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sumito. Thank you, Dr. Cox. Professor Sumito, thank you for having created this important space for intentional, critical conversations, and for the invitation to spend time with you, with students of the Cape Cod Community College, of Massasoit Community College, of Stonehill College, with faculty, staff, and administrators. I'm very happy to be here with you this afternoon. I will open with a Haitian greeting, and it is honneur. And if I heard you say or respond respect, I know you're familiar with this greeting that some Haitians use. So it's honneur if someone meets someone, meaning honor. And then the second person, the person being greeted, might respond with respect, respect. Honneur, respect. I really love this greeting, so I offer it to you. And the first poem I will read is not my own, but written by a man named Félix Morisseau-Leroy. It's written in Haitian Creole. It's entitled Moi-même ou même, or me, you. So I'll read to you the poem in Creole and then read the English translation. A little bit about Félix Morisseau-Leroy. He was a great advocate for the inclusion of Haitian Creole in the realms of education, culture, and literature, and started to create literary texts in Haitian Creole as early as the 1940s, when most texts were written and published in French, the language of the colonial power, that was overthrown, of course, by the Haitians in our revolution of 1804. And he tied the decision to use Creole to the quest for civic inclusion of all Haitians. And most Haitians speak Creole, though a small portion speak French, though French was the language of formal education, has been for a long time, the language of government, the language of power. So he felt it was really important that Creole be elevated. And in 1987, Creole became recognized as a national language alongside French. Here's the poem for you, entitled Moi-même ou même. And you can hear me, yes? Moi-même ou même, lui-même, yo-même. Comme dit moi, c'est lui-même. L'aime dit li, c'est où? Yo c'est moi, c'est li, c'est ou même. Nous c'est nous-mêmes même. Nous toutes fin vie laide. Nous toutes coupables, coup innocents. À qui ont payé sous douane, coup yon ti moun malade. You, me, you. Me, you, she, they. When I say me, it's him. When I say her, it's you. They are me, are she and he, are you. We are ourselves, ourselves. We've all ended up old and tired, all as guilty as we are innocent, with one country in our arms, like a sick child. I really appreciate this poem for the statement it makes of how we are all tied together, how we are connected, and how we are all responsible for our communities and our countries, whether they are the United States or Haiti, or both. Félix Morisseau-Leroy. This next poem is entitled Ana Kaona. Ana Kaona is a well-known figure in Caribbean letters and culture. She was the indigenous ruler of one of the 5 regions of Haiti, now Hispaniola, the island shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic, at the time of Columbus's arrival in 1492. And she sought to unite the 5 regions against the Spanish colonizers, but was ambushed and murdered in her attempt. She nonetheless stands as a great leader in the history of colonial resistance. And her name in Arawak, as Professor Samanido mentioned, is golden flower. Ana Kaona. And my name will be dropped. Golden leaf. Flower. Voice of gold. The gold of mountains, beyond mountains I've crossed to behold my own face. Despite my body's death in double cross by a Spanish gentleman's deal, the sword, the crucifix, despite divisions of time, of tribes, Taino, Carib, the island's body itself, its zones, Marian, Magua, Maguana, Higüey, Charagua, engulfed, transfigured, my own children scattered, the samba lost, their tongues scattered, my name buried by music foreign to me, the mountainsides bursting in red, my gestures marooned. I've seen what will be the mirroring gaze through time, the sun in eclipse, reflection and reflection, an imprint of my face, the study of my aim, and my name will sow maize. My name will breed vision. My girls will be black, bronzed, their eyes will be storms, and my name dropped, golden leaf, flower, voice of gold, the gold of mountains beyond mountains I've crossed to behold my own face. A stateless poem. In 2013, Dominicans of Haitian descent were stripped of their citizenship by a Dominican Constitutional Court, although in 2014 a law was passed creating a pathway for citizenship. But some argued that that was not enough. And so that event had me considering the question of statelessness, citizenship, civil rights, and this poem emerged, a stateless poem. And I'm also, before I read it, I'm also thinking about the Haitians at the Texas border right now. If you are born and you are stateless, if you are born and you are homeless, if your state and home are not yours, and yet everything you know, what are you? Who are you? And who am I without the dark fields I walk upon, the streets I know, the blue corners I call mine, the ones you call yours? Who am I to call myself citizen and human and free? And who are you to call yourself landed and grounded and free? And who is judge enough? Who native? Who other? And who are we who move so freely without accents of identification, without skin of identification, with all manner of identification, with gold seals of approval, with stamps of good fortune, with the accident of blameless birth? Who are we to be so lucky? This next poem is entitled Intersection. And it was written after the devastating 2010 earthquake in Haiti, though we have since had another devastating earthquake this year, just recently in August, in the south of the country, and that part of the country still recovering from that. So I was asked to write a poem that would go into a magazine that would go toward relief efforts after the earthquake. And I found that I had great difficulty with language, in part because of the scale of loss of life. As you know, more than 200,000 people lost their lives in that event, in that earthquake. And I'm also, of course, thinking about the more than 700,000 people here who have lost their lives as a result of COVID, many in communities of color. And so back in 2010, I was just struck by that loss of life that could have been avoided were it not for structural violence, overcrowding in Port-au-Prince, compromised government, international intervention in the affairs of Haitian governance. And so this poem emerged out of that moment. It's entitled Intersection. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. Ash. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. I walked through it. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. Ash. Ash. The earth shook, a portal opened. I walked through it. I walked through it. I walked through it. The earth shook. A portal opens. I walk through it. I want to switch gears a little, or a lot, and read a poem to you entitled How to Kiss. Not that kind of kissing. We Haitians have yet another way to greet one another, and that's by kissing each other when we encounter one another on the cheek, one cheek, the next cheek. And kids learn how to kiss their elders or their relatives who come to visit for social events. And so this is about one such instance of kissing. How to kiss. The children know how to kiss, to descend stairwells when called, into rooms of colored lips, whispered entendres, demure smiles, the uncle who in Creole calls us cochon marron, wild pigs. We walk into crooned comment vas-tus, rolling too long from gold-filled mouths, thistly jowls. We kiss the cheek, the next cheek, and more cheeks, the odors of Vitalis, the smart man's hair tonic, of Ben Champagne, Chanel No. 5, Eau de Floride, of various adult O's. We bristle in advance against the teenager whose 5 o'clock shadow goes from sun yard to sit in parlors, his knees eclipsed in cloth, a foreshadow that we too would be the kissed. But Pascal had the audacity once to alter form, opening her mouth to snake a tongue that swept beige powder from the face of Madame Alta Grace la Vache, exposing a patch of brown from chin to ear. Un véritable scandale. Tongue on cheek. Truth indeed. The wild pigs. This is entitled Small I, in reference to the small letter I. This symbol, I, a symbol, streak to sun, pole and stop sign, stick and circle, never ceasing, its dot, eternal I, never ceasing to see. Two C's, touching lips, an open mouth in prayer, and O, not majuscule, the small I, unegoed. As children, we went from print to script, on yellow paper ruled like the roads crossed to school. A line was two parallel paths for ascenders, descenders. School nights beneath a lamppost, my mother, a girl, is learning to count, not stars, but figures with the others in the dark. Un et un, deux, deux et deux, quatre. In quatrain of songs, set to learn facts aren't earth, aren't dirt to be digging, are a desk, are a trade to be traded for fields. Her mother figured she would measure infinitely and counted on her counting to keep her free. Me, she led to the word as puzzle, as game to ungag the number of times she'd stood unworded. She decided to start in the midst of things, leaving A and E, picking up small I. I am now going to read to you from my most recent book, a book of translations, the work of Haitian poet Ida Faubert. And I just want to point out the cover. This painting is done by my good friend Colette Brésila, who's a beautiful Haitian painter, and then designed by one of my former students who is a graphic designer. So I just love that the whole book is this like woman power, girl power production. So I'm going to read to you some poems by Ida Faubert. She was she's a Haitian French writer. Her mother was a French woman. Her father was the former Haitian president, Lysius Salomon. He was given a coup d'etat, so the family moved to France, and she was raised in France. But then as a young woman, she returned to Port-au-Prince, scandalizing Port-au-Prince polite society, going back to France and writing these very beautiful poems, many love poems, and also at the same time, I think, negotiating the tropes that had been established for women of color in the European imagination, in the white European imagination, and resisting those tropes in her poems. So I'm going to read to you one of her poems in the original French, so you can hear the beautiful sounds, the rhythm, and the rhymes, and then I'm going to read to you my English translation. This is Soir Tropical, or Tropical Night, by Ida Faubert. Le soir est lumineux, le soir est tendre et beau. Le soleil s'est éteint, la lune est sur les roses. Une langueur pénètre au cœur même des choses. Et les grands palmiers noirs rêvent au bord de l'eau. Les jasmins ont mêlé leurs branches étoilées aux lianes en fleurs. La laine de l'été caresse les fruits lourds. La grave volupté laisse traîner son voile au détour des allées. Là-bas, sur le chemin, pas un chant, pas un bruit. Rien ne trouble la paix d'un bonheur qu'on écoute. Viens sentir les parfums sur le bord de la route et respirer mon âme éparse dans la nuit. Ida Faubert. Tropical night. The night is luminous. The night is tender and beautiful. The sun has obscured itself. The moon rests on the roses. A languor enters the very heart of things, and the tall black palms dream at the water's edge. The jasmines have mixed their star-studded branches with lianas in bloom. Summer's breath caresses the heavy fruit. The dense sensuality lets its long veil linger along the sinuous paths. Over there, on the way, not a song, not a sound. Nothing disturbs the peace of a joy we listen to. Come, take in the fragrances at the road's edge and breathe in my soul, spread across the night. Ida Faubert. I'll read two more poems. This next poem has a very bad title. And the poem contains some cuss words, so you are forewarned. The poem is entitled Shithole. Several years ago, our president, not the current president, became frustrated with lawmakers who wanted to extend a protected status to immigrants from El Salvador, other parts of Central America, African countries, and Haiti, who would be especially vulnerable if they were repatriated. The president then asked, why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? I think he would have preferred folks from Sweden coming and so on. So being from one of those countries, I tried to enter his mind for a moment to try to understand his perspective, but only for a moment. And so this poem emerged. Shithole. I am the interrupter, hijacking your train of thoughts. Call me maldito, cabron, la bestia. Get on top of me and I'll throw you off after you beg. I'll ride you like a borrowed mule, drive you across the river to sell you up it. Call me coyote, call me wolf. Call me whatever the fuck animal you like. Missionary, priest, call me Mr. President. I'm all green, a blue gasp. I'm the womb sterilizer, syringe and suction, the foe of women. I'll drown you in a teaspoon of potassium chloride. I was born an abomination. At the age of 1, I crawled out of the Congo, dragging my sack full of hands. At the age of 2, I mechanized my scythe. At the age of 3, I wove myself a cape of flies. At the age of 4, I blew the noses off sphinxes and studied the hieroglyphs of your tomb. At the age of 5, I became an angel, cunning, big-eared. At the age of 6, I shot down the moon. Then I shot down the sun. I am a nuclear bomb set for noon, the paratext of your nightmare, the translator of your tribulation. I am a constipation, the parasite entering your left ear, the worm nestled in your colon, the sweetest liar, the drone of your inner war, the architect of your gas chamber, the poisoner of your water, the multiplier. I am the radioactive sphincter, the unthinkable, intolerable, bleached ass. This last poem I will read is entitled Poem for the Poorest Country in the Western Hemisphere. And often here in the United States, listening to the news about Haiti, we often hear Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, as if it's Haiti's only metric, as if this were Haiti's last name. And I grew tired of hearing this label affixed to Haiti. Not that Haiti does not struggle from poverty. That is very, very real, but Haiti is much more complex than that label. We don't hear Haiti, first nation, first independent nation in Latin America, Haiti, first Black republic in the Western Hemisphere. Often we don't hear, Haiti, a country whose liberation movement served as model for 20th century African decolonization struggles, Haiti, country of extraordinary art traditions, and so on. So this poem was, in a way, a response. Poem for the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Oh, poorest country, this is not your name. You should be called beacon. You should be called flame. Almond and bougainvillea, garden and green mountain, villa and hut. Girl with red ribbons in her hair, books under arm, charmed by the light of morning. Charcoal cellar in black skirt, encircled by dead trees. You, country, are merchant woman and eager clerk. Grandfather at the gate, at the crossroads, with the flashlight, with all in sight. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. We have a few moments left, and there will be some questions. We have time for some to be asked. Please type some in the chat. And I do have some that came in early. You'll notice I'll be going back and forth. So please bear with me. One of the questions, Danielle, your books reflect your global and historical perspectives of Black literature. What common threads do you see running throughout the legacy or diaspora of African literature?
That is a great question and a difficult one. I will attempt an answer. Common threads in African diasporic literature. I think certainly liberation is an enormous theme in African diasporic literature in many, many forms. The notion of voice, I think, is also a theme. I think about the Negritude movement, for example, right, which emerged in Paris in the 1930s and the 1940s, in which students from formerly and at the time currently colonized nations got together, Black students, right, to attempt to articulate an identity that was not only predicated or limited by a colonized vision, right? And so we had the work of Aimé Césaire, for example, and Senghor. But prior to that moment had been the Harlem Renaissance moment in the United States in the 1920s. And then later we would see the indigenous movement in Haiti. So there were all of these conversations taking place among people of the African diaspora, which of course necessarily means people who are spread across the globe, attempting to understand themselves as beyond enslaved, right? As beyond the subhumans that the French, the English, the Dutch, and so on attempted to make us. So liberation, voice, identity, freedom, and extending notions of liberation and full humanity, I think, have been themes of the literature of the African diaspora.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question that came in straight from YouTube. A stateless poem and intersection should inspire social activism. How do you see poetry being a force for social change today?
I think the work of artists is to reflect what is taking place in the world and also project what is possible. So giving voice to what may be problematic in the world, I think, is an important part of certainly what I feel my work does. So identifying what is troublesome, what is problematic, what binds us, what keeps us limited, I think is an important part of the work of literature, and is a type of activism, right? A liberation, a contribution, big or small, to the liberation of the mind. I think that is an act of activism.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in from the tri-state area. What was your inspiration or motivation for choosing Haitian poet? And you've kind of answered this, but Ida Foubia, for your most recent publication in translating her poetry from French to English in Island Heart. Why her?
Why her? Growing up, I did not know many Haitian women poets. I know that there were some around, but I just didn't know their work. And so she was among the first Haitian women poets I encountered as an adult writing poetry. I find her interesting because of her unusual biography, because she was a woman who was able to publish under her own name in Haiti in the early part of the 20th century, which was unusual. Often Haitian women writers were forced to adopt pen names and names of men in order to be published. And so she had enough juice to be able to publish under her own name. So that impressed me. And also, again, as I mentioned earlier, she was rejecting the tropes, the social limits applied to women of color, both in Haiti and in France.
Okay, thank you. And her words remind me of our Zora Neale Hurston. Really just they speak similar, even though one a few decades later, but one born here. So thank you for that response. We have another question from a staff here. Your writing reflects on leaving Haiti because of politics, language crossover, immigration, cultural influences, and assimilating in Boston. How does your experience compare on today's Haitian social, political immigration conditions in your poetry? That's a mouthful right there.
Would you repeat that question?
Yes, yes. So let's just take the second half. How does your experience compare on today's Haitian social, political immigration conditions in your poetry?
I'm not sure if the question has to do with comparing my experience here to what's taking place in Haiti right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I don't live in Haiti.
Right.
And I would say too that there are wonderful writers in Haiti. There are wonderful writers here in the United States and in other parts of the world, and also in Haiti. If you want to read some extraordinary Haitian writers, read the work of Yannick Laens, for example, or Emily Prophète, and wonderful young writers, young poets rather, in Haiti. So Haiti has a very rich literary tradition. I encourage you to read both the folks writing on this side of the water and writing on the other side of the water. But I do feel that, I write all kinds of poems, some of them having to do with Haiti, some of them have nothing to do with Haiti. But I do feel that I do think that my work sits within a Haitian literary tradition called the engagé tradition, work that is socially engaged. I don't feel personally that I can write about Haiti without considering, a very complex country and very complex people, both the good and the bad, what we're challenged with, and the great beauty of certain Haitian experiences.
Thank you. And a very simple question. What is your next big project?
Yeah, I have a couple of projects that I'm working on. Another book of translations. There's a wonderful Haitian poet and novelist and writer of children's stories in Canada named Marie-Célie Agnon. And so I'm translating her first book of poems. The first book, it was published in 1994. And I'm very excited about that because it gives me a chance to work with a living poet, where Ida Faubert had long expired when I started working on her translations. Marie-Célie Agnon is very much alive and living in Canada. And so I get to talk to her as I'm making those translations. And then I've been very struck by what's taking place on the border of Texas and the United States with Haitians, and so that has been a subject that I'm taking up in a new group of poems.
Thank you. And speaking, of what's been transpiring at the border, it does really, it brings us back to when we first began this program and started speaking about the Pan-African flag and Pan-Africanism and Afrocentricity. Before all that happened, we were pre-Reconstruction, we were antebellum. And when we see that happening at the border, it reminds us of slave catchers. And a lot of the students here have felt really heartbroken by seeing that. And we here at Cape Cod Community College, and especially in the advising office, try to look at the whole student and focus on really meeting them where they're at and tapping into any emotional needs that they may need to have met. Because when you see those images, of course, of caravans, a lot of students have said, both Haitian and non-Haitian students, well, how did they get to Central America? they don't understand that due to economics, they had most likely left within the last 5 to 10 years and followed the caravans north. And the images of those on horseback have been very disturbing and reminds you of the Haitian film artist, I'm trying to call his name, Raoul Peck, his HBO series, What Exterminates the Brutes, I think. It's very disturbing images. And I think what's really important for all of us to take away today is that with the IDEA Committee, that we first began that under our last Vice President, Dr. Arlene Rodriguez. We all came together and we started to respond to what was happening, not only locally, nationally, but globally. And whenever a Gen Xer, someone in our age group, a contemporary, President Juvenal Moise was assassinated, I felt the college needed to respond, and we did respond, and that's when I reached out to you. And since that first connection, we've had the earthquake, and we've had these terrible images at that border. And it's so important that we support artists such as yourself who continue to write. And we want to try to support you the best we can by having events like this. Now, I want to see if we have any more questions coming in for Danielle.
And I'll just jump in and say that I wrote a very brief essay called The Hard Work of Justice, which was published on the Mass Poetry website, and a link for which should be in the chat. So I really encourage you to look at that essay, and it's accompanied by poems from written by Haitian poets in Massachusetts, and also links for essays by scholars and journalists and anthropologists and others that give a sort of a broader sense of how we have arrived at this moment. And so I really encourage you to take a look at that and what is happening in Haiti, what has made Haiti unsustainable for some of our brothers and sisters, why they would take such perilous journeys to Central America for work, but also escaping the very challenging situation that is Haiti, or certain parts of Haiti. You know, the gang violence in Port-au-Prince, for example, that makes living very, very challenging.
Thank you. And we can't forget our playwrights. Danielle, we thank you. And we know you're a poet, but we cannot forget Edwidge Danticat. So we have to give her a shout out. Her work is so prolific. And we do have, at Cape Cod Community College, we have a Caribbean population, mostly Republica de Dominica and Jamaica, and a small Haitian student population. However, the students here at Cape Cod Community College not only want diversified curriculum, they crave it. And what we did do in the theater department here in 2010, in response to that horrific earthquake, we created a performance art piece called Liberté non poussée. Excuse me for my broken Creole, but freedom comes from dirt comes freedom or liberation. And what was so prolific and powerful about that performance art piece is that there were no students of color involved in that classroom or in that piece. And it goes to show you how people do want to learn about the African diaspora. They do want to learn about liberation. They do want to learn about Latin America and neo-colonialism, and how to make sure that mistakes that had happened in the past do not repeat themselves. So we are trying to take that approach here at Cape Cod Community College. So we have a few moments left. If there's any one who would like to give a quick question, we have time for that. Or a comment, because today's reading was incredible. Thank you. And what usually does happen with intentional critical conversations, Danielle, is I get flooded with emails, or committee members get flooded with emails after the event is over. So I'd like to thank everybody for logging on, for streaming with us today at Cape Cod Community College. Stay well, stay blessed, stay lifted, and stay safe. Thank you all.